For Creamer Media's Polity, I am Shannon de Ryhove. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me to discuss emancipatory and ethical leadership. Welcome, Raymond.
Thank you.
Your column speaks of democratic and emancipatory politics. Why do you use both these words, and what do you understand by the word emancipatory?
I think there's an overlap between what is democratic and what is emancipatory, but I think emancipatory connotes something that is wider, extending beyond the political, and also something that is never over. Certainly, I've previously written and said here that freedom is not something that I regard as realized on any particular day. It is something that is ever unfolding as we imagine new ideas of realizing ourselves. But I think emancipation is wider in the sense, but I think even when I refer, say, to knowledge, if I say there's emancipatory knowledge, it is also connected with freedom. But if we talk about culture, knowledge, and various other spheres of human activity, what we are talking about is something that allows people's human capacities and creativities to flourish. So my notion of emancipation is something where things are always in motion. There is never a finalized situation, and we never stop and say, now we are emancipated. Now, the problem in history is that you have a notion called the emancipation of the slaves, which happened in 1865 or whatever it was in America. Now that suggests finality. But in the United States, you can see that the way people grappled with emancipation is that they did not see themselves as fully freed by the emancipation decrees. And even today, people say we have a black president, African-American president, but we still don't have full freedom for African-Americans, Latinos, and a number of other Amerindians and other people in America. For example, you're much more likely to be shot and killed if you're an African-American in America than if you're a white person. And these are some of the indications of the fact that there are continuities between the slave period. Angela Davis, for example, sees the prison complex, the expansion of imprisonment compared with the expansion of educational facilities. That expansion of imprisonment is another way of keeping African Americans unfree because they are disproportionately represented in the prisons, just as in South Africa today, black people remain disproportionately represented. I think emancipation also refers to a number of different things like culture, the question of hierarchies, status where someone stands above you. Now, an emancipatory outlook would not be one where a status is permanently conferred on one person to control something in relation to another. But in the beginning, if you are a child, you do need to defer, or the parent needs to claim his or her right to protect the child, to help the child across the road, to stop the child from running across the road, etc. But permanent hierarchies, such as notions like respect your elders, have to be questioned because it depends what it is that the elders are advancing. We need to build a critical consciousness among South Africans, an idea that we ask why. Why is this so? Why is this necessary? Why must I do this? What is the reason? Now we have lost that capacity, which to some extent was present in the debates of the 80s, the 90s, places like that. Nowadays, there's not much debate. So I see the two concepts as overlapping, but I see emancipation as going broader and nothing being finalized in both cases.
Now, there are a range of sayings that advise one not to trust politicians. Do you not think there is something naive or unrealistic in your demanding of an ethical leadership?
Yes, you know, people say, well, what do you expect? This is a politician speaking, things like that. And the same sometimes goes for lawyers. A lot of people don't trust lawyers. But my understanding is that when I was involved in the struggle, I followed the example of people who were ethically exemplary. Chief Luthuli, Bram Fischer, Oliver Tambo, Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Albertina Sisulu, Lillian Ngoyi, people like this. And there used to be people saying things like, I would take a bullet for that man or that woman. In other words, he had such respect for the person that he would be prepared to die if necessary. Now, in 1992, I saw a literal example of that. In the Bisho massacre, when we marched on Bisho, I was there with Chris Hani, Cyril Ramaphosa, a number of other people, the late John Gomomo from Kosatu. And when they opened fire, we went down on the ground. And the bodyguard of Cyril Ramaphosa threw himself over Cyril Ramaphosa, literally demonstrating the saying that I'm prepared to take a bullet for this person. Because what that signified is that the Secretary General of the ANC, which Cyril Ramaphosa was at the time, represented for him and the organization leadership which was charged with a very important ethical political task to be selfless in advancing the freedom of the people of South Africa. Now, at that time, it was seen that a person holding an office like the President or the Secretary General or whatever it happened to be had to be defended at all costs because they represented these values. Now, these may be stated values, but we have to be always vigilant to ensure that they are in fact carried out. And I have pointed to the fact that there have been some situations where people need to be asking whether the leadership is actually acting in good faith, even by their own beliefs, but in terms of the understandings of the freedom that we believe in. Now, I think that that ethical quality may not always have been present. Some people may have foreseen the possibility of securing wealth with the onset of democracy, but very many of the people that I encountered, Chris Hani, for example, were imbued with a certain ethical conscience, and that example was very important for others. It was a model of leadership. Like Luthuli was a model of leadership of a particular type. Sisulu, Mandela, you could learn the way they listened to people, that they really cared about them. It is said that before people crossed the border for MK, Hani would say to them, "Are you sure you are ready?" He didn't want them simply to die. He wanted to be sure that they were ready to undertake the dangers that lay ahead. So I don't think ethical leadership in politicians is unattainable, but I do believe we need to, it's in the first place something that each of us has to ask ourselves. But at the level of what is policy, what is law. We can say this is the basis against which we are measuring whether you stand up to what we expect from you. And we used to not have to do that because it seemed that the leadership did abide by that. Certainly it is different today.
Thank you for your insight.
Okay.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about emancipatory and ethical leadership.